We're about to study page 17 in Tractate Yiruvin, and now I'm going to ask you a question. Do you see this picture? Okay, so here is the question. I'm not only asking you to recognize someone in that picture, but also I'm going to ask you a question: what this picture has to do with our study. Ma nishtana. What this picture has to do with our study today. So I promise you, if you listen carefully to the daf today, during our session, when we reach the Mishnah, the middle of our study, you will have the answer to this question. So, what we're going to study? We're going to study first, continuing the Hilchot Yiruvin, especially the idea of Mavoi. Then we go to the idea of discussion in sense of something that rooted or uprooted. We're talking about corpse on Shabbat. We talk about met mitzvah. Sometimes need to be involved with burial for the absolute mitzvah. We'll talk a little bit about the law of blessing before and after meal in a certain circumstance, and for sure we're going to talk about soldiers in a special situation, and time allow, we hope to complete Mitzvah Hashem this perek, Mavoi, the first perek of Tractate Yiruvin. So page 17a, we just need to complete our unsolved the subject that we have to rush yesterday in our session. So we said at the top of the page 17, Reisha Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda v'Seifa Rabbanan. You're going to tell me that the first clause is going by Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, and the second clause, which is that three people become like a shayra, like a caravan, and you go by the second clause according to the sages. So the Gemara said, "Ein, yes." So Rav Nachman hold the same as Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, mishum dekayavua b'shtatei, which means because his father go in that idea that it's again we differentiate between one person, two people, and three. We make it like a caravan. Now we go to the sugya of the whole idea of counting people in the sense of caravan or individual. Amarav Gidl Amarav Shlosha Bechamesh Asurim. Sometimes, if even you have three people, they cannot carry in a house that have 5 se'in, even they have a petition not in the best quality. However, Besheva Mutarim, sometimes even in the house of 7, saying they can carry. So they said, Amrule, so we respond to Rav Gidel, Amar Rav Achi, you tell me that that's what the Rav said. Amarlu, Oraita Nevi Uktived Amar Achi. So again, what exactly 3 by 5 he meant to say 3 by 5? So when he said originally Shlosha Bechamesh, which means 3 people prohibited to carry even in the area of 5 bet se'ah, Rashi said here, Klomar pe'amim 5 אנשים אסורים אפילו ב5 se'im ופעמים שמותרים אפילו ב7. So in my book, Birah Klomar Berashi al Hashas, I tried to explain what did Rashi meant. Because if you tell me that in the size of 5 se'im we cannot carry, so for sure in a 7 you cannot carry, because it's a larger empty spot. So that's the Rashi tried to emphasize, and that's the reason why I used the word klomar. He said pe'amim, that it's an extra chidush here, because sometimes 3 people even forbidden in 5 se'im, and sometimes even in 7. So here we go, and we said he made Rav Gil made like some type of oath, and he said it's like I'm making an oath that by the Torah, the prophet, the writings, that's what exactly what the Rav said. In other words, even it sounds very weird, very uncanny, very unusual that the Rav said it, but that's what he take like an oath. So the Gemara asked for their question. Amar Rav Ashi, my kasha, what's the issue? Dilma hachi ke'amar. Maybe he meant as follows: 3 people who tzrechu leshesh veikifu b'sheva, if they needed 6 beitzeah and they enclose 7, which means in not the best petition, afilu b'sheva mutarim, they allowed to carry even in all 7. Why? Because the minute you allow all this part, you allow the entire part. It's not just the idea of allowing them. If you remember what we said yesterday, when it's come to caravan, when it's come to shayara, so you go and you give them kol tzorkam, you give them whatever they wish to. So even more than 6 seim. So therefore, it's not an issue. So he said, Lo tzrechu ela lechamesh veikifu b'sheva, if they need only 5 seim. And he put around a 7, even not the best petition, afilu bechamesh asurim, even if 5 is prohibited. Why? Because there is an unoccupied space of 2 beitzeah. So ve'ela hadekatane. So what will we learn? Ubilvad shelo yehe beitzeatayim panui. That we allow the shayrat, the caravan to carry whatever they need, as long as it's not beitzeatayim open. My love panui me'adam. Which means you have to say that that's apply to people. He says, Lo panui mikelim, which means that we're not speaking about person, we talk about utensils. So Rashi said here, Klomar sheyesh ben hamechitzot betzeatayim panui. So I try to explain in my book that the reason that Rashi used the word here, Klomar, it's because it's basically based on the Rashba and Ritva, that they say that the Gemara speak about a person, not about utensil. So it's not necessarily utensil. When they use the word kelim, they use the word utensil, it means they need, and not the amount of people, but what needed. So therefore, even 3 people in a 4 se'in, so it's all the mechitzot, all the petition, it's annulled, because it's as long as they have 2 se'im, it's fine. So Rashi said, Lo, panui mikelim, lo, it's like a literal sense, that as long as you have their utensil, so this petition, this mechitzot, it's fine. But he said, but the idea of lo, it means that you need to have a certain use in those utensils. So usually when Rashi needs to explain an expression, he go in that way. I saw also in a book called Gaon Yaakov, and you see it also in the Mishnah Berurah, in Seif Katan Chet. You see Shulchan Aruch in Shin Samech in 360, that the whole idea of Panui Mikelim, it's talking about 2 se'im in addition to a people. So when you use the term kelim, it doesn't need to be a utensil per se. It can be that it's a vacant place, that it's not in the use. Again, in my book I elaborate in a long explanation. I just give you the abbreviation. Itmar. Now we talk about a situation that if you have a place that have a mechitzot, a partition, but it's not in the best condition, that it change according to the amount of people that dwell on Shabbat. Itmar shlosha, if you have 3 people that they are staying in an area that it's more than Beit Se'atayim, if there are 3 people in a caravan, and then they said umet echad mehem, that it happens that we said, what we said earlier, that in order to make shayara, a caravan, you need to have three people. So what happened if one of them passed during Shabbat? So he said, as individual or two, you give only beitzah time. Or the opposite, shnayim, if it was two people before Shabbat, v'nitvasfu alehem, all of a sudden on Shabbat, other people join them, and now they have more than two. So now is the issue you're allowed to carry. You're not allowed to carry because you treated three and a shayara different than individual. Rav Huna and Rabbi Yitzchak. It's a machloket between Rav Huna and Rabbi Yitzchak. Chad Amar, one of them said, HaShabbat goremet, which means you go by the entrance of Shabbat, Knisat HaShabbat, and the situation that was taking place at the time that Shabbat begins, that makes a difference to validate those petitions or not. So the whole halachot follow the moment the Shabbat begins. So even later things change, such as the amount of people there, the halacha did not change. That's one school of thought. The other, v'chad amar, dayorin gormin. No, we do not go by the time of entrance of Shabbat. We go by the people
who are currently there.
So to make the mechitzot valid or invalid. So he said, tistayem. So how you conclude? The Rav Huna who the Amar Shabbat goremet. You go by the Rav Huna that said that you go by the entrance of Shabbat. And he said, the Amar Rabba Be'ai me Rav Huna u'be'ai me Rav Yuda. I ask this for both Rav Huna and Rav Yuda. Eirav derech petach. If you take 2 yards and you make the Eiruv according to the entrance of that wall that separate between them, v'nistama petach, and that entrance was locked by some situations that changed. For example, it was a big like a storm and changed the situation, or derech hachalon, if it was a window in that wall that separate between them, v'nistam hachalon, and the window closed during Shabbat, mahu, do you allow to carry from 1 yard to another? Amar li Rav Huna, and Rav Yuda said to me, Shabbat oil v'utra utra. Since you go retroactively at the time of Shabbat, that you allow to carry, that domain remain for the entire Shabbat, even during the time the circumstance changed. Tistayem. So therefore, we go by that way, which means even if there 3 and one of them pass, or 2 and one of them add to them, so he holds that you go by the time of Knisat Shabbat. So what do you derive another thing from that? It has to be the other side, which is Rav Yitzchak, that said that you don't go by the entrance of Shabbat, you go by the people who dwell there. So now we said, Lema Rav Huna v'Rabbi Yitzchak, these 2 Amoraim, biflukta de Rabbi Yosef v'Rabbi Yehuda kamiflige. They go in conjunction, in equivalent to the Tanaik, early Tanaik disputation. Ditnan, which means that it is a 2 disputation that connected to each other. So we learn, in other words, we're going to learn, but in a sense they already learned it when they quoted. It's an upcoming Mishnah, page 94. Chatzer shenifretza mishtei ruchotea. If it's a courtyard was breached from 2 of its sides, וכן מבוי שניטלו קורותיו או לחייו, מותרים לאותה שבת ואסורים לעתיד לבוא. Or if a house was breached from 2 of its sides, or if an alleyway, cross beams, or side post was removed, so he said it's permitted to carry them on the Shabbat, and you are not allowed, you're forbidden for the future. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's what Rabbi Yehuda said, until he fixed it. Rabbi Yossi אומר, אם מותרים לאותה שבת, מותרים לעתיד לבוא, ואם אסורים לעתיד לבוא, אסורים לאותה שבת. He said, you go as follows. If that Shabbat they allow in the future. If you forbid that Shabbat, you forbid it. So in other words, he holds that you cannot differentiate between this Shabbat to other Shabbatot, since they are forbidden to carry them in the future until he fix it. So therefore, even in that current Shabbat, you can no longer allow to carry in that domain. What we learn from that is that according to Rabbi Yehuda, whatever it's allowed, it's allowed. According to Rabbi Yossi, it's the circumstance change that can change their status. Leima Ravuna Damar Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Yitzchak Damar Rabbi Yehuda. Now we try to juxtapose the Tanaim to the Amoraim, which means that Ravuna hold that we always go by the time of the Shabbat begins, and Rabbi Yitzchak hold the same as Rabbi Yossi, that we hold according to the situation that constantly change. Amar la Chavuna, Ana de Amre afilu le Rabbi Yossi. I hold even according to the idea of Rabbi Yossi. Ad kan lo kamar Rabbi Yossi atam. Over there in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi said that you can carry on Shabbat. Ela de leitnu lemchitzot. Only the place that the petition was there at the time of beginning of Shabbat. Because the idea of those petition is a great deficiency, and therefore it can change according to the situation. Hacha itnu lemechitzot. But here, this petition at the beginning of Shabbat still there. So therefore, even Rabbi Yossi hold that the beginning of Shabbat changes status. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar, Rabbi Yitzchak hold, Ana de Amre afilu le Rabbi Yehuda. I hold even according to Rabbi Yehuda. Ad kan lo kamar Rabbi Yehuda tam eladit nau le dayorim. That those dwellers was there at the time of the entrance of Shabbat, which means that the changes of the situation is not connected to the people who dwell there, because the situation that was in the beginning of Shabbat, it's still now. Hacha leitnu ledayorim. But here, the dweller that was there at the time of Shabbat is no longer there, which means that the people who dwell in is not the same situation as they were at the beginning of the Shabbat. So therefore, the changing of status of the dweller, it's not a great deficiency. It's not, and the situation can change according to in a constant change. And v'chachamim omrim echad mishnei dvarim, meaning either Erev or Shti, either one of them, it's enough. So, meaning that they say that either vertical or horizontal, it's sufficient. So, Hainu Tanakama. So that's exactly what the first Tana said in the Mishnah. Ika benayu yachid beishuv. It's applied when it's individual in a settlement, which means that the first one hold that is not allowed to rely of any petition, any mechitzot, lechatchila, but the sages allow it in every case. So now we're going to the Mishnah, and since we have the previous Mishnah in a special leniencies that the rabbis have in the caravan, so therefore we go now to another leniencies that the rabbi said in conjunction to a time of war. Now we're going to the picture. Remember I showed you a picture at the very beginning? Okay, now you see the picture? Okay. This picture, unlike the way that some people think, your rabbi wasn't a chaplain. First part of my service, I had the privilege to have part of my service in Lebanon. And then I have the second part of my service, which was a reserve. For 9 years, I was in a special job in a Gaza Strip. I served every year between 87 to 95 for about 30 to sometimes even close to 40 days in Gaza. our unit, my unit, is a special job. Our job was, it was a time of war, it was the first Intifada, and our job was, we have special people who have many languages skills, and people who talk not only fluent Arabic, but other languages as well. And we are the intermediary unit. It was a special a civil administration intelligence unit that we are the liaison between the special forces and the headquarters of the army and the local people. We involve from small things such as giving license to people to go and walk in Israel, to complicated situation which was a very sensitive issue at the time of war. So why I'm showing that picture, it's because you, Rabbi, was one of the officers at that time. I was in an intelligent liaison officer at that time, and therefore we have endless urgent situations that we need to follow wartime rules. So at the time of war, sometimes you cannot follow all the regular peaceful time halachot. You have to go in different direction, and you assume in my unit only I have myself and another one soldier that was observant. So they said as follows. The Mishnah tells us, Arba'a dvarim patru b'machane. The sages exempt 4 things in a camp that go to the time of war, even it's not a pikuach nefesh, even it's not a saving life, but it's still a time of war. 1. The soldiers mevi'in etzim mikol makom upturim mirchitzat yadayim midmai u'mile'arev. They can bring a wood for heat for every place. They don't worry about thievery, and they exempt from washing the hands before the meal, and also from eating demai. That's a rabbinic prohibition of taking a tithe from people who are not educated, amaretz. So they need to have a special tithe. Damai, what is it? Because if you're not sure if they have a tithe, so it's a chash tevel. So therefore you need to do it, and also to do a Eiruvei chatzerot, that sharing the yard when you need to do Eruv. All of these things at the time of a soldier in a service, they exempt. Tanu Rabbanan. מחנה היוצא למלאכת הרשות מותרים בגזל עצים יבשים. He says that if you have a military camp that go out to wage on an optional war, it's permitted for the soldiers to steal dry wood. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beitema אומר, אף חונים בכל מקום, מקום שנהרגו שם נקברים. They may also encamped in any location, even they damage the field in which they are encamped, and there was a place that they will be killed, they shall be buried. And the owner of that site cannot object moving the corpse from the burial elsewhere, dishonor the dead. So again, we talk about a situation like that. Usually, optional war talk about the time of Joshua. That Joshua basically involved with Milchemet Mitzvah, which is the time of Amalek and time to save Jews from any enemies. But anything that it's not this type of Joshua war, I meant to say something that is not in Joshua category. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin, early part of Sanhedrin, page 2, they say that the others, it's called optional. For example, the Rashi said, King David want to extend the border of the land of Israel, that's considering optional war.
But defensive wars are, even besides Joshua and against Amalek, if you're defending Eretz Israel, that's considered an obligatory war, right? Not an optional.
Because indirectly you're saving lives.
Right, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, okay. Excellent.
מותרים בגזל עצים יבשים. They're allowed to steal a dry wood. So they said, Haita kana Yoshua hava. That was the decree that Yoshua made. The Marmar Asarat Naim itna Yoshua, when Joshua divided the land of Israel. So he divided it with a 10 condition. Number 1, Sheyehu Mar'in Bechorashin, that one may gaze this animal in woods belonging to other without objections. Umlaktin etzin misadohem, and one may get a wood for its own use from their field. So it means everyone allow it. So what's the Braita wants to tell us here, that in a camp you're allowed to do it? So they said, Hatam behizmei vehegei. There in a Joshua time that he allowed it applied to shrubs and thorn. So that's that the people are not particular. Iname, another option. Hatam b'mchubarim. So over there in the Joshua time, it's applied to those who are attached to the ground. So if you remove the thorns, so it's again, it's attached to the ground. Hacha bitlushin, here they talk about detach. Iname, alternatively, there in Joshua time, belachin, it's applied to a moist. Hacha biveshim, but here they talk in the Mishnah referring to a dry throne. רבי יהודה בן תימא אומר, אף חונין בכל מקום, ובמקום שנהרגים שם נקברים. רבי יהודה בן תימא said that even they also may encamped in any place, and in the place where they are killed, they be buried. So they said, pshita, met mitzvah, it's for sure it's returned to be met mitzvah. Met mitzvah if there's no one else to take care of the burial process. So everyone is commanded to take care of that deceased. Umet mitzvah kone mekomo. The halacha is that if you have a corpse, he basically the owner of that spot, which means he allowed to be buried right in the place that he was dead, he was killed or he passed, and he's now turned to be the owner of that spot, even it belonged to other people. That's the halacha. So therefore, if it's a met mitzvah, that even Kohen Gadol allowed to take care, if there's no one else, of that dead body, why Rabbi Yehuda ben Betea tells us that that's specifically in regard to a soldier that get killed. So the Gemara responded and said, Lo tzricha, af al gav. You don't need this necessary, this teaching, the principle military camp, even though. Just turn the page, 17b, the Itle Kovrim. So there is a Rambam and Radvaz in Hilchot Melachim that goes in different direction here. Meaning over there, if there are other people like his children, other people that take care of all the burial process, so then it's a different story, so they can take care of him. But since they are so occupied with the war, and they cannot take care, unfortunately, with the time of war, you cannot take care always of every corpse, and therefore it turned to be a met mitzvah. So therefore, Meiri explained, based on this idea of the Rambam, Hilchot Melachim, chapter 6, he holds that it's, in a sense, the spirit of met mitzvah. So, and again, it depends how you take it. Some said, like the Radvaz said, that it's really met mitzvah, and the Meiri said that the spirit of met mitzvah, since no one else can take care of the body, so therefore he is like conquered, or he have the ownership of that place, the Tanya. Zeu met mitzvah, that's very important halacha. What is considering a met mitzvah, a
unattended corpse?
Unattended corpse, thank you. That everyone is obligated to bury him. Kol she'en lo kovrin. If someone, unfortunately, is nobody else to bury him, that's met mitzvah. Kore ve'acherim onim oto. So if he is have some people that are taking care of him in close by, which means if he called them before he passed, they will take care of his burial. which means that either the one who found the body, or basically if before his passing he has people to take care of him and they agree upon, which apply again to relatives, etc. So they said, Ein ze met mitzvah. So this is no longer under that category. So they ask, met mitzvah kana mekomo? So you tell me that and the met mitzvah is actually acquire its place? V'atanya, המוצא מת מוטל בסרטיה, if you find a dead body in the place that many people walk by, like a central part, מפנהו לימין סרטיה או לשמאל סרטיה. Remember in the Shabbat we talk, Sratya is like a place that people loaded and unloaded, like the shuk. So therefore you move it. They said either the right side, left side, sdebu, if it's a uncultivated field. So usdenir, and is the other field that they have plowed.
Plowed, right?
You're right, plowed. So mefanel is debu. So he move it to uncultivated and he buried there, which means you bury in the place, according to Rashi, that caused the least expense.
Right.
Then he said, sdenir, usde zera, mefaneo lisdenir. Again, it's different category. If it's a plowed field and sown field, so he put him in the place that it's a plowed field. Again, less expense.
Right.
היו שתיהן נראות, שתיהן זרועות, שתיהן ברורות, מפנהו לכל רוח שירצה. If all these fields are the same, so he can put it whichever he used, which means that met mitzvah is not necessarily buried what it's found, it can be elsewhere. So that's different than what we said earlier. Amar Rav Bibi, hacha bemet mutal ala meitzar askinan. Here we're dealing with the corpse that laid out across the side of public path. So therefore it's like in a place מתוך שניתנה רשות לפנו מן המצר, מפנהו לכל רוח שיצא. They want to avoid the Kohanim to pass by, so they move it to elsewhere. So in order to avoid any type of ritual impurity, so you can put him in any side you wish to.
Anyone who's tahor.
What?
I said anyone who's tahor.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Then the next one we said in the Mishnah that those soldiers upturim mirchitzat yadayim, they are exempt from washing hands. אמר רבי לא שונו למים הראשונים ולמים האחרונים חובה. That apply only the washing hand before the meal, but after the meal it's different. Why? Because it's involved with dangerous. אמר רב חייא ברש"י, מפני אמרו מים האחרונים חובה. Why they say that you have to take water before the end of the meal? מפני שמלח סדומית יש שמסמא את העיניים. In those days they used to have a sodomite salt. And sodomite salt carried a special chlorine. And in that sense, since you touch that salt, which combines sometimes with a regular salt, and you touch your eye, it can be a very dangerous.
Magnesium chloride is.
Magnesium chloride.
Yep.
So therefore, they requested to put this water, even in this case of soldiers. So Abaye said that that's very much present in the portion, the single grain, in the entire core, which means that that's usually combined with the regular salt. Tosfot, I must say, that give 2 points here. Point one, he said that now we don't have this obligation on the Mayim Achronim. Why? Because we don't have anymore the sodomite. You go to the Dead Sea, you see it, but it's not corn putting in a people's table. The second, he said, those minagim that used to put their hands with the salt is no longer applicable. So therefore, he holds that that's only in the Talmudic time. But anyway, Amar le Ravacha b'red Rava le Ravashi, Kayel milcha mai. So he asking him, if one measures salt and came into a contact with sodomite salt, but it's not during the meal time, what the halacha? Amar le halo mi baya. So for sure he needs to wash his hands. The Rashi here it tells us that מדד בלח לחמרים צריך ליטול ידיו או לא. So he deal further with that. ופטורים מדמאי is also the exempt from giving a tithe, usually when it's taken from someone who's not uneducated. Etnan, this is Mishnah in Tractate Dmai, chapter 3. מאכילים את העניים דמאי, you're allowed to feed the poor people with dmai, which is not clear if they are taking tithe or not. ואת אכסניה dmai, which means if you you're hosting soldiers that they go to the war against the enemies, so you're allowed to feed them with dmai. Why? Because dmai is basically rabbinic, and therefore we are more lenient when it's come to this. אמר רב הונא תנא בית שמאי אומרים מאכילים את העניים דמאי ואין את האכסניה דמאי, ובית הלל אומרים מאכילים את העניים דמאי ואת האכסניה דמאי. So again, it's a machlokes. Beit Shammai said that you shouldn't do it. Beit Hillel said yes, you do it. You should feed the poor people with dmai and achsanya, and you host the soldiers, you can also feed them with dmai. Upturim le'arev, they are also exempt from the obligation to put Eruv, and that's applied to Eruv Chatzeirot. Amrei dever Rabbi Yanai, they said in the Beit Midrash of Rabbi Yanai, Lo shanu ela Eruvei Chatzerot, that applies specifically for Eruvei Chatzerot, the courtyard that you join and everyone puts some food and then you combine everyone. Aval Eruvei Tchumin, which is you have to extend more than 2,000 amah, Chayavim, they're not allowed to go outside of the Eruv. The Tana Rabbi Chia, Lokin al Eruvei Tchumin, if someone exceeded more than 2,000 amah, deserve Malkot, and it is Dvar Torah. Since the Torah tells us in the book of Shmot, Al Yetzei Ish Mimkomo, a person should not move from his domain, so therefore it's a biblical prohibition. So therefore the rabbi is not lenient. Matkif la Rabbi Yonatan v'chilokin alav b'shebe'al. The Torah said Al Yetzei Ish Mimkomo, shouldn't a person should not go. He didn't say lo. Lo meaning is real love. But when you use the word al, so for sure there is a Meshech Chochma and the Malbim that deal with this definition. One is it's really considering al the same as lo or not. But anyway, Matkif Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Ela me'ata dichtiv al tifnu el ha'ovot ve'la'idונים. The Torah said in Leviticus 19 that we should not go to all these different sorcery, and they use the term al, and you see here it's a clear negative commandment. So it's written clearly in al, and everyone agrees that they deserve malkot. So they said Rabbi Yochanan hachei kashelei. Rabbi Yochanan said lav shenitan le'azharat mitat beit din, which means this is a prohibition that given primarily as a warning of a court imposed capital punishment, which means the prohibition which under certain conditions is punishable by the death and not by lashes. So they said v'chol lav shenital azarat mitat bedin elokim alav, and any prohibition that have this ability of the court imposed capital punishment, one is not flood, because you always go if it's you have several punishments you need to impose upon someone. So if you have a capital punishment, that's supersede everything else.
Right, you're not going to give him lashes and then execute him. Right.
So here, how come the Braita said that he deserve a malkot for tchumin, for extending more than 2,000 amah? Amar Rav Ashi said, look carefully at the sentence. Miktiv, what is written in the book of Shmot, book of Exodus, chapter 16? It's written Al Yotzi, meaning a man shall not carry out, that is a prohibition against carrying object from one domain to another. Al Yetzer Ktiv, which means, because they use the word Yetzer, not Yotzi, which means that's apply only tchumin, only the measurement of 2,000 amah, that this is a prohibition that involves mitah, a capital punishment. So therefore, it's good to say that a person deserves a malkot. So we said now hadran alach mavoi, and some rabbi said, by the way, when we use the hadran, when you complete the tractate, some rabbi said you should say hadran alach bli neder. Why? Because otherwise you commit yourself to go and visit that. So I saw one day in the Luach Davar B'ito from Rabbi Mordechai Genot of Bnei Brak, that he said he wrote some sources that the person should say bli neder without making a vow. With that in mind, we are now going to the second perek, Baruch Hashem. Second perek, the sages made a special decree for all these pilgrims. It was a pilgrims that used to go 3 times a year, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, and the sages allow them to go to those well water and to pull out the water. You remember we studied it in order to feed their animals on Shabbat, because this well area is private domain, and sometimes they have a 10 handbreadth and sometimes more. So you have an issue of pulling the water and put it at that entrance of that well. But the rabbi said, especially since that area can be a Reshut Rabim or Carmelit, etc., so they make a decision to have a pasim. Soon I show you. So therefore, this area will be a private domain. So now look at the Mishnah, and we go to the pictures from the Daf 124 to 127. 124. Do you see the picture clearly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The Mishnah said, Osim pasim labiraot. You're allowed to arrange an upright board to the biraot. So Rashi said, שיהיו הפסק הללו עושים את סביבות הבור רשות היחיד וימלא ויוציא ויוכיח שם. This is the diomad, and this is the well. So that's the way. This is well that is in a public domain. So when you do this, arba'ad yom din, you make a 4 yom din. That's called yom din. In 4 corners. Nir'im keshmona. It looks like 8 because each one of them contain 2. So 2 times 4, it's 8. And he said that's Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So that's basically allow them to use it in order to feed the animals. Rabbi Meir Omer, Shmona nir'im keshnei-masar. Arba'ad yomdin v'arba'ad pshutim. He said it has to be more in order to separate that, and you make basically 8. So you have 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay? But it looks like 12 because you have 4 diomadin that each of them contain 2, and then you have 4 pshutim, 4 simple, just 1 line. So it's appear like altogether 8 plus 4 is 12. And then he said, Govhan asarat fachim verochban what it is? Verochban shisha. Okay, so the diomadin has to be a 10 handbreadth high, and the width has to be 6 tfachim. Does everyone see it? Okay, and then he said, ועובים כלשהו, וביניהם כמלוא 2 רווקות של 3 בקר, דברי רבי מאיר. So Rashi said 10 amot, which means you see you have here 4, 1, 2, 4, 6, 8 diomadin. You have a regular pashut one twice, times 4, it's 8, okay? Now in between two of them, you have here 10 handbreadth. So if you look carefully, you see that the 6 animals here, they have this line in both sides, 3 and 3, and it's basically 10 amot of the distance. That's the word of Rabbi Meir. Now, רבי יהודה אומר של 4 קשורות ולא מותרות. אחת נכנסת ואחת יוצאת. So you have basically lines that one toward the inside, one toward outside. So that's basically a leniency that it's more space versus if you treat them in one lane. Then he said, מותר להקריב לבאר. You allow to make it close to the well. You see that animal getting close to the well? ובלבד, on condition, שתהא פרה ראשה ורובה בפנים ושותה. You see the head of the cow? She is mainly can drink directly. So you put a spot for her, that's the Yumedin, and basically she can drink directly from that. So he said mutar. Now we turn just few lines from in the next page, page 18. להרחיק כלשהו בלבד שירבה בפסים. You're allowed to make some distance as long as you have some boards. רבי יהודה אומר עד בית צעתיים. You're allowed to distance until the distance of בית צעתיים. And he said, אמרו לו, לא אמרו בית צעתיים אלא לגינה ולקרפף. אבל אם היה דיר או סהר, if it was, for example, a place that you put the animals, it's called deer. It's like a pen or a stable or muktzeh. It's also muktzeh is not only set aside; it's also a yard in the back of houses or chatzer, a yard in front of the houses that people usually goes there. Afilu beit chameshet korin, even that they have a place of 5. קורין, אבל אפילו בית 10 קורין, even a 10 בית קור, מותר, you can carry it. And he said, ומותר להרחיק כלשהו, you're allowed to have a distance, the board extends of any amount, ובלבד שירבה בפרסים, provided that one increases the upright board between the double posts. So that's the way you can use it. So Rashi said, וההני פסי דיראות נע מועיל במהם רואים שתת אדם תשמיד דירה מעל יהוד. And tomorrow in Mitzvah Shem we elaborate on that. Now we're going to practical halachot. First halacha is a Rambam Hilchot Melachim. The soldiers in a military camp who are going off to war or returning from battle are exempt from tithing demai, from ritual hand washing, and from joining courtyards. They are also permitted to take wood for their own needs, even if it's dry and detached. That's the Mishnah explanation of the Gemara. If 2 courtyards were joined with an Eruv via a certain opening, and that opening was sealed on Shabbat, the residents of 2 courtyards may still carry them. Some commentary, including Rashi, state that the residents are permitted to carry from one courtyard to the other through opening in the wall. Other authority, including the Rambam, rule that under these circumstances the residents of each courtyard are permitted to carry only within their respective courtyards. We said also the soldiers heading off to war may encamp in any place. We said that soldiers are buried in the place where they are killed. The owner of the field may not object since they are considered a met mitzvah. We talk about the condition of Yoshua. One of the 10 conditions stipulated by Yoshua is that one is permitted to graze one's animals in wood belonging to others. Sheep are allowed only to graze where the trees are large. However, if the trees are small, it is prohibited to gaze them there without the owner permission. It is also permitted to gather thorny shrubs from field, provided that they are moist, are attached. If a corpse is found along a road or in a city of non-Jews with no one to bury it, it is prohibited for the person who found it to leave the place until the corpse is buried in the place where it was found. The person may only leave if he is in a place where one is called other people will come and tend to every aspect of the burial. Also, we talk about the corpse with no one available to bury it is located between two fields in a place where it cannot be buried. Then it should be laid to rest in the place that causes at least damage to the owner of the field. If the two fields are equal in terms of potential damage, one should bury the corpse in the closest field. If both fields are equally close, one may bury it in either field. Soldiers in a military camp are exempt from washing their hands before the meal. This halakha applies to other cases in imminent danger as well. However, they must wash their hand after the meal, and we explained that the sodomite salt, not according to a Tosfot that said it's not applicable. One may feed poor people and soldiers the mai, and there is no need to separate tithe. However, they must be informed of the matter so they can separate the tithe if they wish. In addition, it is permitted to feed guests the mai if they are passing from place to place and will be spending the night where they are eating. Soldiers at war are exempt from the adjoining courtyards. That's the Mishnah said. However, they are required to join Shabbat boundaries, and some commentaries conclude that members of a caravan who enclose their tents with a partition are also exempt from joining courtyards. And as we said many times, that the whole idea of a time of war, we treated a very different way. The last halakha of today, we talk about pasim lebiraot, which is upright board around the well. One may erect 4 L shape, you remember the geomite, units of upright boards around the well, with each unit creating a corner. The distance between the posts must be large enough to allow 2 terms of cattle with 4 oxen in each term to enter the well area. This law is according to Rabbi Yehuda, and as the rule follow Rabbi Yehuda when he disagree with Rav Meir, and that's a Rambam, Hilchot Shabbat, chapter 17.